Why, hello, it's I, Wacky Anime What If, here with What If Issei Was Betrayed and Got Sea Monster Powers, Ending 1. I hope you enjoy. Issei is currently chained up in thousands and thousands of chains. They're digging into his skin, and every fiber of his being, wrapped around his bones, his blood vessels, his heart, his organs, everything. If he circulates too much mana, they will crush him from the inside and split him open. He's also 500 meters below the Grimmery estate, while 500 meters above him is the meeting room, which he was going to break into and slaughter them all. But Issei has a trump card in his possession. But he has to look around the room real quick. He only observed the chains. He sees that there's 5 Gatling guns in every corner of his cell. And the cell is magic insolent, so he can't use any magic from himself. Though he can use magic items, which they really are going to regret not making sure they checked him properly. And also, those Gatling guns have arrows which can pierce gods, can pierce mythical beasts, and could even pierce a Leviathan if had the chance, or even stop a Hydra's regeneration. So Issei doesn't want to set those off. He's being very careful on how much magic he's circulating through him, even though every time he circulates magic, there's pain coming from the chains. They start squeezing tighter, but he needs to circulate it into one spot so he can break out. But he hears guards outside of his cell, his magic insolent steel door, and he hears them speaking about how much of a pushover that Issei was to get here. Did he really decimate armies? Did he really cause our Lucifer himself to be vitally injured? But he can't escape this. And the other guard says, "Shut up, dude. You know gods couldn't even escape this prison, right?" And Issei merely thought in his head, "Oh, I'm not a god. I'm much more than a god." Or what you guys would say the equivalent of a god would be. I'm much more than that, is what he's thinking. He hears 5 footsteps heading towards his cell. He doesn't correlate all of the mana towards the item he has in his coat pocket yet. He waits till the 5 footsteps are outside of his door and one person walks in. It's Konako. She's in her adult form. And she looks at Issei and says, "I'm sorry, Issei, but it was either I helped them get you, or I betray the person who lent a hand to me when I was in need. When I was young, Reese was the only one that helped me. Me and you may be friends, but we don't go that far back." And Issei could understand this after hearing the reasoning, and merely just said, Then how about this? If you can help me escape, or if you say that you will join my side, I'll spare you." And she says, "Spare me from what?" "I'm sorry, Issei, but there's no way you're going to be able to escape. Even if I helped you at this point. But I'll try. What do you need me to do? I had a change of heart recently, considering I heard how they betrayed you. More in detail. Because before, they didn't tell me all the details of how your betrayal went. They said you went berserk and tried to kill them all when you were trying to discuss of how to kick you out of the barrage. They didn't say that they were trying to kill you. And they didn't say they were trying to claim the power of the Red Dragon Emperor. They just mentioned the fact that they tried to kick you out of the barrage, and, well, I didn't know that. I personally thought they were going to extract the pawns without removing your soul or forcing you to remove the pawns themselves. And Issei merely looks at Konako and smiles and says, "Alright, I'm gonna guess we can start the plan." And Surzex, Rias, and all of her barrage walk in, and so does Makil, and they say, "Konako, you traitor. You betrayed him, and he accepted you back. But why would you want to be on the losing side?" And Issa says, "Oh, she did the right call. You guys, however, did not." A slip of paper falls out of his coat pocket, and a magic circle imbues the entire dungeon that Issei was in. And Loki and Kokaville pop out. And Loki tells Kokaville to go plant the papers all around the Grimory residence while he helps deal with the trash. Loki merely breaks the chains very easily. And Makil is wondering how did he break the chains so easily. And Issei said, "Oh no, he didn't break the chains. I did. He just helped me a little." When Loki punched the chains and they broke, it was because Issei's black flames of hatred were all around the chains. But he used some of his magic to turn it invisible to the naked eye. They didn't think about sensing magic, because they thought he couldn't use any while he was under the chain's influences. But no, the entire room was in a blaze of black hellfire. It was ensuing everything. The entire room. Reese, Surzex, and Makil were running out of the room. But Issei grabbed the back of Makil's neck and threw him into the prison cell. And the steel door closed behind him. And all that Issei said was, "Loki, go wild. Make them see that their rulers are merely using them as cattle, disposable pawns. We will make it to where the underworld, the heaven itself, and the fallen angels will all be at peace with each other. No more violence, no more war, and no more deaths." I realize that me being clouded by my own anger and wanting revenge is different than being clouded by anger. Wanting revenge is just me wanting revenge, wanting to right the wrongs. But being clouded by my own anger is not how to do things. I realize that. If I let anger control me, then I'll be nothing but an empty shell, and all of you will be too after we finish this. So, Loki, I know you hate the Asgardians, and I know you hate all the other gods, but please don't destroy them all. Destroy the ones you hate with a passion. Don't just kill indiscriminately. Same with the devils. We're going to make sure that we don't kill everyone. We'll make sure we only kill the ones responsible for all the madness and corruption in the society of each faction, starting with this one. Issei looks at Konako and says, "Do you want to help me take out the trash?" And Konako says, "Happily." Her hand changes into a tiger claw. She digs into Makil's back, and the claws go deeper until they reach into his spinal cord. And she pulls her hand, plunges it even deeper into Makil's back, and grabs a hold of the spinal cord and rips it out. And Issei heals Makil, and he says one thing. Issei crouches down, whispers in his ear, "Hey, looks like your spine's gone. I don't think you really had one in the first place." I was quite surprised when she managed to pull one out. I thought that was already taken out from you, Makil. He grabs the back of his head, and he throws him as hard as he can, and it breaks the steel door that was closed. And he flies all the way outside the Reese estate, all across, and everyone can see Makil, one of the leaders of the faction, is being thrown like a rag doll. As Issei just flashes very quickly behind Makil and keeps on throwing him from place to place all over hell. All over the underworld, he's being thrown everywhere. Until Issei gets tired of this and punches him as hard as possible into the ground, making the entire Reese estate, the entire Grimmery estate, tremble from his power waves from that punch when he infused as much mana as he could into it. When he punched him directly into the chest, it exploded. There was a giant hole in his chest. He fell to the ground, coughing up blood, and screaming in agony and in pain. Screaming, "You monster! You shouldn't have survived. We should have gotten the boosted gear, the power, which should have been ours, not yours." And Issei immediately says, "Even if you had this power, you would never control it." Before he lifts his hand up, and a black flame ensues his hand, and he throws it down with all of his might. And the little black flame turns into a giant hell hurricane. A hurricane of flames, of dark wind, ensues all around Makil, burning him to a crisp from inside and out. His bones are melting. His insides are steaming. It's like he's being cooked alive. His entire face is melting while he's alive. He swears he can feel his skeleton when he taps his head. He can feel his very skull. And then he feels nothing as he slowly gets obliterated. Issei lands downwards in front of Makil's burnt ashes and merely says, "Well, I was expecting chicken wings, but hey, I guess when you turn up the heat too high, you burn a few things." And he merely walks away, as all the devils who saw this were in fear. And Issei uses his boosted gear and says, "Boost, Drake, boost." Voice, my vocal cords, boost them. And Drake says, "Okay, partner." And Issei screams, "All of you, are you not tired of being ruled by Sir Zex? You not tired of the poverty, of the betrayals, the wars, and all of the misfortune he's caused upon you? All of you, look at yourselves. Look at the slum areas in the underworld. Has he done a thing about it?" And everyone looks at each other. They're all in rags. The entire underworld was being drained of all their wealth by Sir Zex, while he was living lavishly. Everyone else was suffering. They look at all of themselves, and they realize, we had nothing. He took everything from us. And Issei said, "So they took everything from you. You're gonna lay down on the ground and wait for them to end your lives? Your lives? He uses you all as disposable pawns. You're just waiting to die." And Issei says, "So, you have two choices. Join me in my rebellion, or you can merely wait and die like everyone else. Not from me, from Sir Zex, or any of the other Lucifers that come past that are corrupted or insane as he is, or cruel or greedy in power. Are you going to stand there and wait for someone to wipe your ass, or are you going to wipe your own ass?" And they all get up from their depths of despair. They raise their hands and say, "To our new Lucifer, Issei Hyodo." Everyone looks at Issei. They look up to him, and Issei merely says, "I'm not the Lucifer. You will address me as the god of the seas, the monster that dwells beyond it all, you may address me as End. Because I will end all of this. The war, everything. All of our conflicts. So join me. And you will have an improvement in your life. Trust me. They all rally behind him. And Sir Zex and Rias, who were about to flee, noticed that all the devils that heard that, even the guards that were transporting him out, all turned against him. The guards who were transporting him through a secret stairwell all turned their spears towards him, and Rias had to blast both their heads off just so she could escape from just the pure fury of the guards. Everyone started chasing after them. They were cast out of their own home, and Issei had the last laugh on that. Issei decided not to kill them, just to let them live out their miserable life in exile forever. From their once home into my new home. And Issei says, "So Loki, how's it going on your end?" He says this telepathically, and Loki says, It's not going too well. He starts throwing up blood, is what Issei can hear. Him throwing up blood or coughing. And he says, "Do you need some help?" And Loki says, "That would be nice." All of a sudden, Issei is about to put a magical circle under him. And Drake ends up asking the question, "How come you didn't summon the Hydra? You could have summoned a creature of immense power if you gave up your Leviathan mode. Or your Hydra mode. You could have summoned a Leviathan or a Hydra. How come you did not do so?" And Issei merely says, "It's because by doing so, I'd cause an end that I would not want. Destruction of everything. I won't be able to control them. That's the reason. Because it'll be nearly impossible to control either of those mythical monsters. And I'll have just ended the world. Or I might have just unleashed more evil into this world. The evil that was inflicted onto me needs to be inflicted on no one else," is what he tells to Drake. And Drake merely smiles inside the sacred gear. He smiles and thinks, Issei's grown up, huh? Issei ends up teleporting towards Loki's end. He's all the way at the Reis Grimmery estate, all the way in the back of the mansion, and he sees Loki being pinned down by Odin and Thor. And all that Issei does is says, Leviathan mode. And his Leviathan armor appears. And he uses the bottom of his feet to jet himself while having the wings on his back propel him, make him fly at a huge velocity. The actual holes in the bottom of the feet, ended up shooting tons of air out, making him go out like a slingshot. He went in and broke the sound barrier and punched Thor straight in the face while kneeing Odin in the stomach at the same time. They flew away. And Issei looked at Loki and saw that he was beaten and broken. Every single bone in his body was broken. He's coughing out blood and he's in pain. And he ends up asking Loki, "So, what have you decided on your end? Do you want to kill all the gods? Or do you just want to kill the ones that have dealt you a bad hand?" And Loki says, I'll make it to where I will only kill the ones that have wronged me. I won't kill anyone else. I've learned from you. You had a reason to kill anyone, any of the factions, but you chose to spare the ones that you hated. And even try to let go of your revenge in the end, just for peace. So I think I'll do the same. After all, you're the one I look up to the most. As Loki gets up with his broken legs, he stands on them. He looks at Thor and looks at Odin and says, "I know what you two have done. You two were the ones that created the Hydra. and the Leviathan. You were part of the gods that made it. I tried to tell everyone, and you condemned me. And Issei immediately says, huh, so that's where they originated from. Thought they originated from somewhere else. He immediately asks Loki one question. Do you want to defeat them, or do you want me to? Or do you want to just do it together? And Loki just says, I think I'll need your help. So let's go ahead and do this together. As Loki put out a silver sphere in his hand and pointed it straight towards Odin. And he fired with all of his strength that he had left. And it fired directly at Odin at ground-breaking speeds. It went into his chest, and it did no damage whatsoever, is what he thinks. But he's going to soon figure out what that was, as Loki fell to the ground, coughing up blood. And Issei immediately just says, alright, let's get the party started. And he goes into his sacred... He removes his Leviathan gear, and he puts out his Hydra gear. On half of his Hydra gear on. He has 4 heads on his left side, and he has his Leviathan gear on his right side. He immediately rushes towards them again, towards Thor, at ground-breaking speeds, using the back of his right side, the bottom of his right side, the bottom foot, using the wind pressure coming out of it, and using his wings while he's flying to catapult himself towards Thor. He punches him with a right hook, which Thor blocks with his left hand, but it shatters. And Issei just says, hey, Hydras, why don't you go ahead and get your little snack? And all 4 of the heads bite down into Thor, and he's screaming because they're injecting venom into his bones, into his veins, and he can feel acid going through him. And Issei grabs his head and starts punching him in the gut as many times as he can with his right and left hands. With his hands, he's beating the shit out of him. He is punching straight through him. He's making him into Swiss cheese. And he kicks him right in the back of the head. And he flies downwards into the ground, and it shatters beneath him. And Issei steps on his head, grabs his hammer, and says, oh, I thought only the worthy could hold this. Why are you holding it, you insect? And he drops the hammer onto Thor's head, and it crushes his head like a piñata. And Odin, who had just witnessed this happen in a few seconds, was dumbfounded. Odin merely said, you shall see the power of the gods. He had a golden energy around him. He formed spears of golden light, and he threw them at Issei. Issei dodged every single one of them. He dodged all 7 of them, but didn't see the 8th one coming to his left. So it hit his left lung. Issei coughed up blood, and ended up saying, is that all you got, old man? And right when he was looking forward where Odin was, he notices something. That's an illusion. Because it disappears. And he looks behind him and notices Odin's right there. He has a staff, and he shoves it directly in the back of Issei. And Issei is screaming in pain. And he gets his Hydra heads to try to bite Odin, but Odin wouldn't let them get near him. He backs away just in time. And the Hydra heads that were trying to bite Odin bite into the ground. They're stuck right now. Issei merely chops them off with his left hand. And he pulls out the rod out of him. And he throws it directly at Odin with all of his strength. And Odin already expected this. He moves to the left. But he feels a sharp pain to his abdomen. But he looked back and he saw the spear already in the ground behind him. How is this possible? He looks down and he sees the spear directly into his abdomen. And he looks upwards to ask, how did you do that? Before he sees Issei readying a punch straight to his face. And he screams in pain because this punch had hellfire into it. black hellfire, which etched into his eyeball, going directly into his eyes, going into his brain, setting his brain on fire. And he's screaming in agony because he's still alive. And Issei burned all of it except for his pain sensors. And he merely says, well, the reason why I was able to do this, even though I used so much power before, while, decimating everything in black hellfire, as he looks all around and he sees black hellfire everywhere. Because when he set the room on fire, he didn't just set the room on fire, he set the Grimoire Estate on fire. But he asked Loki to put an illusion around it to make it look like it was perfectly fine. Which is the reason why Loki was so exhausted. Issei looked towards him and says, oh yeah, one more thing. You're gonna be dead now. Also, the reason why that spear went through you is because, you know that silver ball of energy that headed towards you? That was an illusion spell. So, certain attacks that I did, well, to you, they happened. But to me, I never did some of them. So you did unnecessary movements. And I managed to get really vital strikes. And that's not all. You have a lot more injuries than just that one. Since you're down on the ground, you should know. And the illusion breaks, and he sees there's 785 separate holes into his body. And he notices that his point of view is kind of off now. It's sideways. And then he sees his body fall in front of him. Issei had just decapitated him right after he saw his wounds. Issei walks towards Loki, picks him up, and flies near Pocaville, who's in the front of the Grimoire residence gathering up the new recruits that he got from the underworld. He hands Loki over to him and says, I need you to take him back to the base. We are not done, but we will make everyone unite. Even if we have to destroy things to do it. Alright, let's go ahead and go back to base. They all went back to base. They recuperated for a few months. The angels and fallen angels are panicking because Sir Zex and Rias Akino were all with them. Were with the angels, which are mourning because Mikhail has died. He managed to get removed out of there, and he was still breathing for a few seconds. That Issei didn't know this. He was breathing for a few seconds, but he died from his injuries shortly after. And all the angels are grieving. Sir Zex and Rias are hiding with the angels currently, and for a few months they think that Issei might have died off or something. Until Issei magically teleports into heaven and walks up towards all the angels, and they all point their weapons towards him, and Issei merely says, that's pointless, and he raises his aura as high as possible. He says, I'll give you two options. 1, face obliteration, or 2, you could join me. We can make a faction together. We won't be 3 factions, we'll just be one together. There is no faction war, there's nothing like that. All races are equal. Even humans. Humans, devils, angels, anything. We're all going to be equal. There won't be a neat reason for wars anymore. We'll all share all of our turfs. There won't be turfs for individual people. We're all going to unite together, and we're going to have the same places, okay? For example, anyone can go to heaven, you can all go to the underworld, or you can go anywhere you want, okay? And the angels reluctantly agree. Same with the fallen angels, which Azazel tried to get away. But once Loki went to the fallen angels and found Azazel, when he was given the same speech, he basically bopped him over the head when he wasn't looking and tied him up. Issei later on killed him. And Issei is currently spending the day with Konako. They went on a few dates. They're having a pretty good day. Issei's united all the factions into one, and has got a cute girlfriend known as Konako. So everything's pretty much ended well for him. And that's how I'm going to end What If Issei Was Betrayed and Got Sea Monster Powers ending 1. This is the good ending, not the true ending. Okay.